Good evening, everyone. Since I see some new faces here, I welcome you. When you broadcast online, you can only see it's a one-way mirror. As of technology, just as of today's technology, and I often meet people who know me. At least they think they know me intimately well because they follow these classes, and I talk about different matters, and they speak to me as if like we're friends. And then I realize that they heard a lot more from me than I heard from them, so it's going to be a little awkward. So in the good old days, when there was no technologies, everything was reciprocal. Today, when you're on the record out there, you can create a different type of a disproportionate relationship. So at the same time, it's always to me refreshing to be able to meet new people. And I think one of the healthiest things in life is to get fresh air, which means not just physically but also psychologically. Infections fester and breed wherever there's no fresh air. So there's an infection that is concealed or covered up. It doesn't have an ability to heal. And the same is true emotionally and psychologically. When we're children, we grow up in our parents' homes. So for good or for bad, at that stage in life, of course, a child is like in your mother's womb, and then later in the home is, if it's a healthy home, so it's a very nurturing environment, but it still doesn't expose you to the elements and to the world outside. And at some point, growing up in a healthy home, to spread your wings, you have to leave your home. And even though every child will cry the first time it goes to school, he or she goes to school, the first time they go to summer camp, every time they leave home. But the fact is, we become independent adults when we learn how to fall, and we learn how to walk on our own. And unfortunately, however, we are also often trapped by the attitudes and the environment that we grew up in, because it sometimes does not allow us to really discover our own voice. I've discussed this many times here. One of the most powerful statements in the Torah is the first commandment to the first Jew, and that is Lech lecha ma'artzecha me'moladecha me'beis avicha, where God tells Abraham to leave your land, leave your place of birth, and leave the home of your parents, and go to the land that I will show you. And if you think about it, the sentence seems very odd. When you give someone directions, the first thing you always do is tell them where to go, not where to leave from. They know where they are, so they need directions how to get to where they got to get. And here, God reverses it. When it comes to destination, it's very vague. Go to the land that I will show you. It doesn't tell them east, west, south, north, which way to go. When it comes to the point of departure, God basically reiterates almost the same thing three different ways. He's saying, leave your land, leave your birthplace, and leave the home of your parents, which technically was all the same place. It was what is today southeastern Iraq. That's where Abraham grew up. And he traveled northwest to Israel. And so what kind of directions are those? But when you give it a little thought, you realize that it's obviously not just a command to Abraham, it's to each of us. That if you want to discover yourself, the first thing is you have to leave behind all the influences that shape you. So, and the Torah describes them as three influences. Artzecha, moladecha, beis avicha in Hebrew, but in simple English, it means three subjective forces that blind us and bias us from being able to really discover ourselves. One is our own natural subjectivity. Each person is born with self-love. And self-love is very good to preserve your interests, but it also can very much distort things, because you don't necessarily see things objectively. You see them from the lens of your own self-interest. The second subjective force is parental influences, the home of our parents. Parental influences, again, for good or for bad, many of our attitudes, how we react to things. The first place we learn love. The first place we learn how to have a relationship. The first place we learn how to react to things when we're in such crisis. will be what we saw from what our parents did. If one of our parents had fits of rage, it often is very common that a child will see that as a very legitimate way of expressing anger, and so on. So for good or for bad, we're very much influenced by those attitudes. And finally, there's peer pressure. The third is the place of the land in which we live. The social pressure, media pressure, peer pressure. We should never underestimate how much impact that has on us, even as full-blown adults. So the Torah is saying that if you want to discover yourself, you have to somewhat free yourself from forces that shape you. So when someone asks you a simple question like, who are you? So besides the fact that most people give you their business card, if they ask you, who are you, they give you a business card. But a business card only tells you what you do, not who you are. Very few people do what they are. And very few people are able to actually have a job or a career that is a reflection of their innermost, the soul's desires. But because the answer to what you do is not so difficult, whatever you're involved in, that's what you're doing. But to answer who you are is a very difficult question actually to answer. An intelligent person mostly would probably answer that I don't really know who I am. I know what I do and I know what has shaped me perhaps, but who I really am and what my real innermost interests and desires are, for all I know, much of it has been shaped by the forces that I just mentioned. So one of the ways to resolve this is called fresh air, meeting new people, being challenged. If you go to a party, it's a question I often ask people. When you go to a party or an event, what do you gravitate to? The people you know or new people? And you'll have most people answer, if they're being honest, will answer they gravitate usually to the people they know. Because you go into a new environment, before you test the waters with new people, you usually hang around with those you're more comfortable with. It just it helps you break the ice, so to speak. But there are people who actually do not want to be with the people they always know. They're used to them. They want to meet new people. And it's very much reflective often of a lot of who you are and how you engage life, how much you're ready to take on. Because it's always less comfortable to meet someone new than someone that you know for many years. They say sometimes even the known evil is better than the unknown evil. For many of us hold on even to not such great friends, but that's our comfort zone. And our comfort zone is a very powerful force. So even though this was meant to be of an introduction somewhat, as I said, I see new faces. The fact of the matter is, from a Torah mystical perspective, the truth is each of us is new every moment, which is really a principle the Baal Shem Tov taught in Hasidic teachings that called perpetual creation. Everything is reborn every moment anew, which really means we live in a dynamic world, a dynamic universe, and each of us is constantly being refreshed and regenerated. Which, beyond all the other messages in that, is that there is always room for hope and growth. One of the big, most painful experiences in life is called resignation. When things don't work and you try it once and twice and 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, at some point you start giving up. You become resigned, you become hopeless, despair, feeling that certain things will never happen. But when you know and you're able to recognize, you're able to get in touch with the fact that perhaps there's always a constantly renewed energy. Just like every moment you have to breathe anew, you can't live on yesterday's air and oxygen, and you can't live on yesterday's food and drink. So the same thing is emotionally, we have a certain rejuvenation that takes place all the time, perpetually. So if nothing else, that itself is a reason for hope. That means that you're not a victim of the past, you're not a victim of circumstances. Everything can change. And just like things can get broken, they can get fixed. It goes both ways. However, it requires your cooperation. So we can end up being our own worst enemy, because if we don't believe in it, if you don't believe in yourself, then the biggest asset you have, which is you and your faculties, are compromised. And you see this even with excellent, even in sports, or in music, or in any particular skill. You see people who are extremely talented, even brilliant in their field, and then everybody has moments where they lose confidence. You see this in tennis, in any other sport. A person could have be top of the world, and then for some reason they lose confidence. It could be due to an injury, it could be due to a psychological block, it could be to some type of emotional crisis. So their skills are still there, but how much is skill and how much is confidence in your skills? Now obviously without any skills you're not going to achieve excellence in that particular area. But how much percent is confidence in those skills? And that's where a good coach who knows how to be both tough and kind can help a person get beyond those blocks. So how many of such blocks are there in our lives right now? And do you have such coaches in your life, or friends, or support that can help you get beyond them? And it's far more complicated actually than it is in sports or in any other type of so-called more physical type of excellence. Because when you have emotional blocks in the areas of relationships or in areas of personal growth and our own fears, it's far more complicated because you're not always aware yourself of what's really going on in our lives. So with all that being said, bottom line that I was saying was welcome to everybody. That was a short way of saying, a longhand, a Jewish way of saying hello. Everything is a long version. But it also is somewhat of an introduction to the theme I want to discuss, which is related to this week's chapter in the Torah. Every chapter, as I always discuss, mention, is in Judaism, time is energy, and living with the times means living with the particular energy of each period of the year. So every day, as I just mentioned, every day has new energy. And it's not just the same energy of yesterday, it's a new, different type of energy. So the energy of this week, the energy of this weekend has a special name. Besides the fact that we read every week the Torah chapter, we also, there's some chapters that have an additional name. And this is one of them. And it's called, even though it's called Shabbos Beshalach is the name of the chapter, but it has the additional name called Shabbos Shira, which means the Shabbos of Song. Shira in Hebrew is song. There are different words for song in Hebrew. There's Shira, there's Zimra, there's Nigun, Nagina. But the way it's called Shira. Shira is song. And it refers to, in this week's chapter, we read about a song. Az Yazir Moshe Bnei Yisrael, the song that Moses sang with the Jewish people, and then Miriam sang with the Jewish women. It's a song of praise that the Jewish people sang close to over 3,300 years ago, following the miracle of the parting of the sea, which was like the final step of their liberation from Egyptian slavery. The parting of the sea, they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. The pursuing Egyptians behind them, the sea in front of them, and the sea parted. And as a result, they went through it, passed through it, on their way to the promised land. And then when they saw that happen, they sang praise. Az Yasher. To extend that this praise, this song is so vital, we actually say it every day in the morning prayers. This Az Yasher is repeated every day, recited every day in the prayer. And it becomes a very fundamental principle in Jewish thought and in life in general, that number one is you acknowledge the gifts that you're blessed with. You don't take for granted anything. So just the fact that singing praise is a type of saying thank you. When something happens to you that's special in your life, you don't take it for granted, you acknowledge its value. But obviously song has more meaning than just saying thank you. You could say thank you without a song. It'd be nice to hear thank you with the song, why not? But nevertheless, song has more power. So I thought it appropriate to discuss this in a more relevant context, in a way that we can, what's the relevance to us today? It's true that thousands of years ago our ancestors were freed, and therefore they sang praise. Why do we read the story every year? And what is the song today? Today we're not escaping pursuing Egyptians, and we're not in front of a sea, at least not in the physical sense of it. So how is this important to us? And as those of you that are familiar with the emphasis I usually put on focus in this class, is its personal relevance. Like, who cares? That's the bottom line. Using an irreverent question, why do we need to know this story? How does it help us in our lives today? We have many issues that we struggle with. As I said, personal issues, financial matters, relationship issues. The list goes on. So, to read a portion of the Torah, you can read out of curiosity or nostalgia, or just historical value. But above all, and that's why it's important to discuss and read, is because it has relevance. That's the word, the operative word. It has personal relevance to our lives today. And that relevance is that this song is our song and is relevant in our own personal experiences today. So, a very loaded and difficult question is when you ask people, are you a happy person? So, of course, we all are not going to suddenly, today maybe different people are very open and direct, and they'll tell you, no, I'm not happy at all. This is a new phenomenon in our times. But very often people will answer, yes, I'm a happy person. And of course, the real question is, what does happiness mean? Relatively speaking, is happiness the absence of sadness? So if you have no tragedy one day, you could say, yeah, if it's absence of tragedy, a crisis, it's happiness. But is that happiness? And what does it mean to be happy? And is happy a state of being, or is it an action? Is it a noun or is it a verb? Truly happy people don't necessarily even go around with a sign saying, I'm happy. They just are happy. It's a state of being. It's 24/7. People who have a certain sense of fulfillment, a certain sense, as soon as they wake up and get out of bed, they jump out with a certain excitement. Not because something special is necessarily happening that day, but because that's how they take on life. How many people are really that way? So I'm not taking a survey here, I'm not asking you to raise hands. I've done my research on these matters. That's why I'm discussing it. And everyone can ask yourself the question in your own heart. And often we define happiness in a very superficial way. Happiness is usually defined by objectified happiness. What I mean by that is, if you get what you're looking for, you're happy. If you don't have what you want, you're not happy. So if, let's say, for a particular, you want to buy something, purchase something, and you're able to go purchase it, it gives you that momentary happiness. Maybe it lasts more than a moment. And if you can't get it, you're not happy. Because we live in an acquisitionary society, which is very much driven by acquiring things, by commodities, by objects. And therefore, our attitude is, that's how we often measure our success. And as I said before, this is very much fed by and very much influenced by social pressure. We're not the only ones this way. This is part of society. We are inundated with marketing messages, people selling us things and saying, you buy this, you're going to be happy. You wear this, you'll be happy. You look like this, you travel here. Now, I'm not suggesting any of those are necessarily false promises. But the real question is that the identification of what it means to be happy? So just for contrast purposes, the way the Torah would describe what happiness is, real fulfillment would be that you're realizing the potential, your unique potential in this world. That is the true definition of a happy person. A person that not necessarily they're fulfilled all the time, but their lives are focused on fulfilling what their unique music in their soul. And that's based on many different texts, but I'll cite one particularly in the Zohar. Zohar basically says, and this is a theme in different Kabbalistic works, that each one of us, each of you here in this room, and each person out there, if anyone is watching this, and even if you're not watching this, so who am I talking to? Well, they can watch it later, it's being recorded. Today everything is potential, So that each one of us has a unique song. You have a unique song right now sitting inside of you. And it's not just one song, one melody, but it's a series of melodies. But it has a particular tone, and has a particular pitch. And it's unique to you. No one else has your song but you. There may be those that can complement your song, there are overlaps, but everyone has a unique song in this. So just like there are no two snowflakes alike, there are no two songs that are alike. And this is by virtue of your birth. This is not due to your efforts. It's not because you earned it. It's by the fact that you exist on this earth. it means you have a special song to sing. Now, firstly, most people don't even know that fact. Some of you may be hearing this for the first time. So it's a good thing to know, because if it's true, it's a pretty interesting thing. It may be more important than anything else in your life. The second thing, of course, is how do you find out what that song is like? And why is it that we don't hear it? So the very basic reason why we don't really hear the song, let alone others don't hear it, is because, think of it like subtle music. If someone started playing beautiful music right now, but you were near a window in Manhattan, middle of the rush hour, even not middle of the rush hour, you're most likely not going to hear the music, or you may hear very few strings of it, because it'll be drowned out by the noise around you. So that, of course, is a metaphor. The metaphor is for in our lives, how much clutter do we have? What's going on in our minds right now? The things that concern you, that bother you. This can be pressures at work. It could be your own personal issues. It could be your own competitive stuff. It could be healthy things, not healthy things. The list goes on. We are filled with all kinds of thoughts. The Torah uses the expression, machshava meshetetes tamid. As opposed to speech, you can speak or not speak. Thought is a wheel that's constantly turning. There's no such thing as no thoughts. You may be thinking about stupid things, or maybe empty thoughts, but there's no such thing as no thoughts. Your mind is always working. So it's either thinking about healthy thoughts or thinking about not such healthy thoughts. So there you go. You have 24/7 that your mind is working and planting all kinds of thoughts. It could be nightmares, it could be positive stuff, and so on. Again, this is something each of you know. Hopefully, you're conscious of what you think about. And the Talmud says that what you think about by day, you dream about by night. So basically, that's so your thoughts, what you're consumed with, is what you're just keeping you busy. And that is like a rush hour. It's full of noise, full of turbulence, that doesn't really allow you necessarily to hear your subtle music. Just like very hard to see stars in New York City. I don't mean Hollywood stars. I mean stars in this heaven. You go out suddenly to the country where there's no lights, where there's no city lights, and you suddenly see a new heaven. The same thing with sounds. I'm a hardcore New Yorker, and I can tell you, you don't really hear the chirping crickets and even birds too often. And once in a while you do, because I guess in this concrete city, they did give permission for some trees to grow between the concrete, and some birds and squirrels and pigeons to hang about. I guess they're very resilient, and so on. But we're not in touch with the natural sounds of life. So of course, you can go into a store and you can buy something that is called reality TV. They'll give you here's a recording of what a waterfall sounds like. And here's a YouTube that shows you a beautiful horizon with some music to soothe us. So it's all nice and good, but the fact of the matter, there's a certain natural sound to life, a natural rhythm to life. I'll never forget a scene I saw once. It was on PBS TV many years ago, and it was just by accident. I don't even know how I fell upon it. So I don't know if you guys know about a guy called it was John Bradshaw. He's one of the first pioneers in the early 70s, mid-70s, what became the genre called self-help and personal growth, or more specifically, the inner child. He happened to be a son of a pastor and son of an alcoholic as well. And he had a terrible childhood. And he, as many others in his generation, were the first to start writing about it. And it was a pretty big thing to write about. These things were always kept, these were always the big secrets. You don't talk about what's going on in your home. Especially now your father's an alcoholic, your mother is this and all that. And became the generation of the expose. Everybody started talking about everything. You know that joke, the Jew goes to a priest for confession. He starts confessing his sins, and the priest says, the priest is so overwhelmed, says to him, before you continue, tell me, when did you see the light? How did you finally come to realize that I'm the person to come to confess? A Jew coming to a Catholic. She said, don't take it personally, I'm telling everybody, So there's a stage today we call break the silence. You break the silence And some people, when they break the silence, which is a very healthy thing, I mentioned fresh air. Often the first step in all healing is breaking the silence. Being able to express to somebody your pain. Being able to express what you're going through. But sometimes you break the silence and then you can't close the dam. It doesn't stop. I'm not being critical. I'd rather hear more than less. Because at least a person is able to express. Silence can be the worst type of cancer of all. So it's better than nothing. But sometimes that's what happens. So the point is that John Bradshaw was one of these pioneers, and he wrote some books and stuff like that. But he was leading a workshop. This is what I was referring to, and it was, beginning I noticed it, and then suddenly it caught my attention, because what he had was a room of, let's say, maybe like 25 people, 30 people sitting there, very similar to a room like this, and he had a recording in the background. When I came in, when I started seeing it, I never really actually went back to look for it. It left an indelible image in my mind. I never even have to, I remember it so vividly. He had this recording, and everybody was sitting, and the recording was simply the sound of a heartbeat. A very loud, reverberating heartbeat. Pump, 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 pump. Not fast, slow, very soothing. This heartbeat. And he begins to speak to the group. First I was also a little cynical, so to speak. Kind of gimmick is this one, But maybe it was a gimmick, maybe it wasn't, but let me tell you what happened. So he begins to speak to the group, and he has this heartbeat. And he says, this is the heartbeat of your mother. And imagine yourself in your mother's womb. And for 9 months, this is the sound you hear. So a heartbeat is an interesting sound if you ever listen to a heartbeat. It's not just a beat of a heart. You also hear in the background, you hear almost like almost like waves of a sea as well. It's like a certain soothing sound. And he begins to speak very slowly and very deliberately. I don't remember the exact words. I'll just give you the content. He's speaking to the people. He's saying, this is the sound of the heartbeat of your mother, that you're inside the womb. And you hear this heartbeat. That's the sound. That's the predominant sound that a child will hear for 9 months. Forever. 9 months all the time. The heart doesn't stop. Thank God. So therefore, you hear the heart. And he begins to speak. Then he says, okay, so after 9 months, and this heartbeat, I don't know, it was maybe 2-3 minutes the heartbeat was pumping away. It went through the whole workshop, the heartbeat, but he's talking about being in the womb, and you're hearing this, and it's soothing you, and you feel comforted, and so on. And then comes the day that you're born. The day you leave your mother's womb. And this sound no longer, slowly the sound drowns out. And you pop out into the world. And he begins to describe what a healthy mother would do. So your mother, as soon as you come out into this world, the first thing she does, as soon as she holds you for the first time, she cradles you. And he begins to speak as if the mother is speaking to everybody there. It was I would say, it may have been staged, I don't know, but it mesmerized me, so it must have mesmerized them too. And he begins to speak, he says, here's your mother speaking, he says, I've waited for you so long. I have prepared a special room for you. I have a nice new warm blanket, clothing, and I will promise to feed you and serve all your needs. Should you ever fall, should you ever have a challenge, I will always be there for you. And he goes on and on. I don't remember all of it, but a good few minutes of this mother speaking to her child, her newborn child, with love, and cradling her to her chest, so the child is hearing the heartbeat, maybe not as quite as loud, but still hearing it. And after maybe 3-4 minutes, the whole room started crying, and so did I actually. And I wasn't in the room; I was seeing it on television. And then at some point he stops. And the whole place is completely blown away. And the heart is still beating. The beating heart is there in the background, and it was like surreal, actually. And then, after everyone comes out of their trance, so to speak, he says, what is it that touched us all? Is because these are the words that you should have heard. And we're either crying because it reminds us that we heard them, or in most cases, unfortunately, because we didn't hear them. But that's what resonates, because we did hear the heartbeat for 9 months. So we may not remember it now as adults, but when you hear about it, you say, yeah, obviously that would have been perfect. That was beautiful. I was inside of my mother's womb, and there was a heartbeat soothing me. And then when I came out on this earth, she comforted me and told me I would always be taken care of. There would always be someone that loves me unconditionally, no matter what. And no matter what happens in this cruel, harsh world, there's a place for me. There's a hearth. There's a home. And there's a heartbeat. And there's all the soothing sounds that come with it. And it was that was what I recall. I don't remember what happened afterwards, to be honest. I always remembered it because I'm just quoting where it happened. It could have been anybody. I'm citing who did it, John Bradshaw in his workshop. But it struck me because, for me, it was like unbelievably reminiscent to themes that are thousands of years old. This is classic Kabbalistic thought. Even though some people think of Kabbalah as some mystical, abstract teaching, the bottom line as it teaches is about our inner self. What is your inner self like? And the best place to go to know who you are really like is the place before we've been shaped by the world around us. And that's newborn children. Think of it like freshly fallen snow. Before people step on it, there's a certain beauty to it, certain purity. In the morning you wake up and there's a freshly fallen snow. There's something about it that's very powerful, very, very, very soothing. We are all freshly fallen snow. And as I said, as the Zohar says, we all have our unique song and melody. And then things begin to trample upon us. So this beautiful song and this perfect heartbeat begins to be drowned out by other stuff. And then we're suddenly adults. Here we are in this room. We're all full-blown adults, each of us with our complicated life and our issues, quote unquote. And the question is, how far have we wandered from that song? And do we even know that it exists? And even if we do know it exists, how do we even get back there? For many, this whole thing could be, some type of exercise in folly. It's very nice theories and stuff like that. But life now is complicated. I've got issues to deal with. I've got a boss to deal with. I've got clients. I need money. A relationship that's a mess. We've got a whole list of things I have to deal with. A mother and a father. And my mother's not exactly such a heartbeat, etc., etc. So I can't put words into your mouth. I can't. Every one of us has, I know, no question, has plenty of things on our plate. But I'm here to say to you, and especially as we speak in this week Shabbat Shira, that you may, with all the challenges you have, you may be undermining yourself by not focusing on your biggest asset, and that is your song and your voice, your melody. Because as long as you don't access that, you can run around all day and try to find all kinds of things that will satisfy you, and instant gratification, not so instant, and so on. But if you cannot reconnect to this part within yourself, which is your legacy, it's your gift, it's your your mandate, then in a way you are short. What's the word? Short something yourself. There you go. Good, thank you. Shortchanging yourself. Good. And so there's many ways to deal with an issue. Like there's symptomatic medicine and root medicine. Most of us look at symptoms. We look at the things that grow out of ourselves. We don't look at the root of where it grew from. And for obvious reason. You look where it's easiest to see. So there's a challenge or a problem. 2 seats, right here, perfect. Welcome to our symphony. We're playing a symphony tonight. So, it's easiest to look. The classic analogy they give today, they use it in the healing world, but actually it comes from a Chelm story. That city of Chelm, those fools who have many, many deep psychological lessons to us, messages. So one of them is this guy is looking for his set of keys at night. He lost his keys. And so his friend comes by, his neighbor comes by and says, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my keys." "Okay, let me help you." "Great, okay. Where did you lose them?" "Let's retrace the steps." So he points like 100 yards away. "So why are you looking here?" He said, "Because here's where the light is shining." This This is the Chelm joke. I mean, it's like a stupid joke, but if you think about it, it's not so stupid. It's something we all do all the time. When somebody, you go to, another Chelm joke goes like this. These two guys go to a doctor. They both have pains in their leg. And the first one goes in. The doctor, is checking it out. And the other guy hears how he's yelling every time the doctor, I guess, is getting closer to the nerve that's hurt. The guy's yelling and screaming. Okay. He finally comes out. And, he looks like quite he went through some trauma. So the second Jew goes in, and this guy wants to see what's going to happen, so he waits outside. It's quiet, nothing. And the other guy comes out, finally comes out, he says, "What happened? I don't understand. You had a pain like I had a pain. Why weren't you yelling?" He says, "I showed the doctor the other foot." So, when someone touches our nerve, it's not exactly something we like. So it's not something we, Now, obviously it sounds ridiculous. You go to a doctor, and you tell the doctor, the dentist, "Listen, you're the dentist. You find out which tooth is hurting." Why am I, Because when someone gets too close to the nerve and it hurts, you recoil and you pull back. That's a common reaction. But obviously, if you're a normal person, you're going for healing, there's no way around this. You gotta deal with the issue. But psychologically, it's much more complicated. How often? And I can tell you this from personal experience, again and again, you speak to people and you start probing. Someone comes to you for help, whatever it may be, you start probing, asking questions, and you immediately see what they want to avoid. The more they avoid it, the more that's the area you got to explore. But you also don't want to come on with a full-fledged assault on somebody's psyche. That's not a healthy thing to do. So you have to do it properly. But the fact of the matter is, very often you speak to someone about an issue, and they tell you this is their problem. I can tell you, I don't want to sound 100%, you never say anything's 100%, but 98% of the time, I'm talking about serious issues. That people, the issues they say are the issue, are not the real issue. They're a symptom of the issue. And not because the person is hiding it, and concealing it, and being malicious or anything like that, no. Because they themselves are not aware. And that shouldn't surprise us. Because it's very hard for us to identify the root of issues, especially our own. Because you may not even remember when that root was affected. You only remember when it began to affect you. When you became aware of it. But we may not remember, not even be aware of that root. So when someone comes closer by asking certain questions, very often people will say, no, it's not that area at all. Trust me, I was very ready. Let's not talk about that. And the more someone tells you, the more they tell you, trust me, that you can't trust them. And again, I'm not saying this because anybody's being trying to be malicious. It's the way it is. When you come close to a nerve, to an area that's very sensitive, most of us will not want to discuss it. And the truth is, that requires real professional sensitivity to know how to go, how fast to go, or not. And as I said, sometimes it's not healthy to just a full assault and say to somebody, "Listen, this is the problem. You came to me. You want to hear what the problem is? This is the problem." Because part of the issue is also how to communicate with someone. Even if you're very 100% clear in your mind that this is the issue that your friend has, they can't hear it. It's not going to help. What are you going to do? Force it upon them. So, big part of a process. Even denial. Oh, there are more chairs there. Yeah, back there. Yeah. Even denial has a healthy role to play. Obviously, anything in excess is never healthy, but denial. Because denial is how a human being is able to cope. When something really traumatic or some real serious issue that you have to face, denial has a role to play, which is it allows you to go pace yourself. Where denial becomes an enemy is when it completely conceals and you're completely ignoring the real problem. But the fact is, in a professional setting, the best thing is to know is to recognize someone's denial means that their nerve is very sensitive. It's a very raw area, and you have to tread carefully. That's what it really means. So to go back to this whole discussion, the fact is each of us has unbelievable music to play. And it's unique, and it's indispensable. And no one that ever lived, can play your music. That's a given from the Torah's model of psychology, psychological model. The problem is that we've wandered away from it. And we've wandered away, and a lot of other things have filled the vacuum. And most of the issues we have, become overwhelming and they take control of our lives. So we can't just say, you know what, let me stop everything and I'm going to go find my song. It sounds very poetic, but the problem is it's not practical for most of us. But on the other hand, it may be the real solution to most of our issues. Going back to the root. So of course, it's not so easy to develop, especially sitting here with a group. There's no generic formula. But there are certain basic principles that I think can be implemented. And they're very much taken from this chapter, as I said, the song, Shabbat Shira. And that is how to, firstly, recognize that song inside of you. Secondly, how to reconnect to it. And thirdly, to do it all in the context of your daily life. Now, of course, this is complicated, as I said, because we're already traveling 90 miles an hour. It's very difficult to work on an automobile that's full speed. You know, like that doctor that brings his car to the auto mechanic, and they're comparing notes. So auto mechanic says to the doctor, can you tell me, this happened to be a heart surgeon. She says, tell me, how much do you get per hour for your work? So he says, didn't even want to tell him the number. It was quite high. You could talk about thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. She says, I don't understand. Why is it that you get tens of thousands of dollars to fix the mechanics of someone's heart, and I get $20, measly $30 an hour, or $50 an hour to fix the heart of your engine, your car? Why is it such a disparate figure? So the doctor, of course, responds, well, he said, try fixing the car when it's traveling at 70 miles an hour, Which is an interesting response. I don't know if it justifies the prices and the insurance policies and all the other things, but that's another story. But it's an interesting response. On the other hand, it reminds me of just to be, equal treatment here. There's a rabbi, Chabad rabbi I know, is in Tucson, Arizona. So a few years ago, the Federation, who allocates money every year for different Jewish organizations in Tucson and other cities as well, but in Tucson they came up with a brilliant innovation. Instead of deciding how to allocate the monies, which is public monies and people who give it to the Federation to distribute, instead of having closed door sessions of determining the allocation, they'll make a public forum, and everyone in the community is invited, and let every organization who wants money present, and let's see what the consensus is from the community itself, instead of just a federation board. Okay, an interesting idea. Some organizations liked it, some didn't. You could figure out which liked what. Anyway, and each one came with their presentation they had to present. There were a few hundred people that showed up to hear everybody's case. Anyway, he gets up there, this rabbi, and he tells one interesting anecdote, and it caused him to get the largest allocation, at least for that year. And his anecdote was, he says, look, I want to ask you all a question. Why is it, this is somewhat of a tangent, but I just came to my mind, this is a little like group therapy, so free association. So he says, why is it that when you go for a surgery, God forbid, you do a lot of research. You compare surgeons, you get references, you may do serious research to find the best one. But when you take a flight on an airplane, even though some pilots are better than others, you don't do any research. You just trust the airline or the pilot. Why don't you choose the best pilot as well? So he said the answer is like this. See, when you're in surgery, so you're lying on the slab, pardon the expression, and the doctor is going to do the surgery. At the end of the day, after the surgery, he's going home to his wife and children, and you're staying in the hospital, for good or for bad. On a plane, if the plane goes down, the pilot's going down with you. So he says, there are two types of rabbis. There are rabbis that are great surgeons and give great advice, but they go home at the end of the night. And then there are rabbis that are in it with you. We go up together, and if we go down, God forbid, we also go down together. He says, I'm that type of rabbi. Anyway, so I just wanted to counter that with a heart surgeon story. It's not relevant, as I said, to this topic. Maybe it is, but I can't find the connection yet. They come to me. So getting back to the discussion here with heart surgeons, talking about the heartbeat, that's the underlying connection. The music within. So there are certain principles, as I said, each of us has our own unique life story and our own unique challenges. Obviously, just to show you the wide spectrum we're dealing with here, some of us grew up in very healthy homes. I know that's a rarity today, and functional homes where we were nurtured, and we did have a mother, though, like I described before, that lived up to her heartbeat, and that nurtured and comforted and was there. And what does it do for a child? You know what it does for a child? It gives the child confidence, dignity. In Kabbalah and Hasidic terminology, the word is malchus. It's one of the 10 spheres. So there's 10 spheres. There are 3 intellectual ones and 7 emotional ones. But maybe the most important of all of the spheres and all of the faculties is a thing called malchus. In Hebrew, malchus means kingship, queenship, queen, king. But it obviously does not mean that literally. It means dignity, majesty. It's a sense of indispensable value. So a person could be very wise, have chachma bina das, which are the 3 intellectual faculties. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge is how it's usually translated. But it's it's like conceiving of an idea, developing it, and concluding it. A person could have chesed, which is love, gevura, which is discipline, teferes, which is compassion or beauty, netzach, ambition, endurance, hoid, humility, yielding, yesod, which is foundation, bonding. So you could have all 9, and you could think, wow, that's unbelievable. A person has such developed all their 9 faculties. But if you're missing the 10th one, which is dignity, a sense of value, that you're really needed, exactly as Bradshaw said in the name of the mother, that you are valuable enough that someone will give their life for you, and someone will protect you in your early years. It develops a confidence and a type of self-esteem, which is our birthright, that you can take on any challenge in life. That's what it does. And the truth is, it's not the parents give it. It's what you have. They just don't screw it up, and they reinforce it. So Malchus dignity is something each of us has by birth. Each of us has the music, the song that I mentioned before. We have a unique, indispensable voice that is yours and yours alone. No one else has it but you. In a healthy, nurturing home, it's reinforced time and again. So by the time you go out into the world of strangers and forces that may be competing with you or may have their own interests in mind that can perhaps hurt yours, you're well armed with that sense of dignity and malchus. Not often, always, if you want to really appreciate healthy things, you have to look at the contrast. What is an unhealthy version of it? Health actually doesn't feel like anything. You only can appreciate health when you see it in comparison to something that's not healthy. Like, what does health feel like? Can anyone describe to me health? As soon as you start describing how it feels, you need a doctor usually. It's not supposed to feel like anything. What does breathing feel like? It's supposed to just go in and out. If there's any sensation, that's not a good sign. So health, just existing, being a healthy human being, means all the fluids are flowing properly, and there are no impediments, and there's no sensations. If there's a sensation, if something is going too fast, or too slow, or there's a dull feeling, or a sharp feeling, and so on, there's something that's a sign that there's something to have to deal with. But how do you appreciate, the fact that we, human beings, breathe? How many times a day do we exhale and inhale? You can Google that. And to know the odds, 75 trillion cells in the human body, that they should all work in coordination in a healthy body, is a miracle. But we appreciate it when you go to a hospital and you suddenly see, God forbid, somebody struggling to breathe, and they need a machine. You suddenly realize, hey, it's not so simple. When you suddenly see the contrast, it's like to appreciate sunlight, often you need an eclipse of the sun. So darkness can illuminate what light is like. Because light doesn't look like anything unless you see the contrast. So what happens in a home that Malchus is compromised? It's not that the song of the child and the voice and the dignity are eradicated or annihilated. It's concealed. So in a home where the mother and father are not giving that message to the child, that you're indispensable, that you're more valuable to me than anything else in the world. And my interests are not more important than yours. And all the messages that abusive and even not so abusive absentee parents, there's overt abuse, there's terrible abuse, but even on a level that is more subtle, all those unhealthy messages end up not allowing your malchus to emerge. So think of it like a gardener that didn't take care of the garden. That's what happened. So the flowers are still there somewhere, but they're buried deep inside the ground, the potential. And instead, your garden is full of weeds. So from the Torah point of view, the song is there, and your dignity is intact. However, it's in a dormant state. It's in a potential state. It's not actualized, which can be the whole difference between life and death, between a healthy life and not a healthy life. So I'm not dismissing it, but there's no such thing from a Torah point of view as damaged goods. So even in the unhealthiest, most unhealthy situation possible, and I'm not going to describe how unhealthy it can get, and hopefully none of you ever were exposed to it, but if any one of you know how bad it can be. What happens there is not that anything is ultimately completely annihilated. What happens is it makes it very difficult. So think of it like a healthy heart. The heart is beating, but the arteries are blocked. So what happens? The blood can't get to where it has to get to, even if the heart is completely healthy. So in the same sense, our song and the dignity of our inner souls is there, but it's like a pilot flame that has no channels, has no way to express itself. And that defines our lives. Now, obviously, there's a very wide spectrum here. There's the worst scenario and there's the best scenario. And most of us are somewhere in the middle. But it's at least a formula that we can apply to ourselves. And you can really even do it, it could take some serious work, but you can actually do it on paper even, to figure out, where you stand. Firstly, how much are you connected to that inner song and that inner dignity? How much are you aware of it? It could be 0, it could be 1, 2, 3, 5%, whatever. And then where are you in your life right now? And is there a connect between the two? If people who are truly in touch with themselves, there's a seamlessness that flows from the inner malchus to the rest of the faculties, and vice versa. For most people, there is not seamlessness, there's a disconnect somewhere. So let's just give an example of a symptom that's pretty recognizable if you have a trained eye. There are people who are very good with mind games. You talk to them, even in a therapeutic situation, or in any given situation, they have the gift of gab, their mind works well, and they can cover up and with smoke screens almost anything. So for someone who doesn't know, who's not trained, who doesn't know how to see it, they can get away with a lot of things by using their mind. They can manipulate and stuff. They may not even know they're doing it, frankly. It's just the tools that they developed to protect themselves in a difficult world. The more mind games a person plays, the more rest assured, the more they had to do that to be creative and innovative, probably in a hostile environment. Very, very secure people don't need to play mind games. They're secure. They don't need to put up smoke screens. Now, someone with a trained eye can see immediately. You see right away. Because, you have a conversation, you see what people do. So people don't necessarily want to be exposed, so you don't necessarily expose them. But rest assured, if any of you are that way, there are people who can see it. So just know that. So you may have to develop some more sophisticated mechanisms if you really want to. But the fact is, we all have our mechanisms. Because as we grow in life, this is true, even evolutionary biology will show you that how creatures and animals, and humans as well, will develop certain tools to protect themselves. If, just an argument's sake, and it is a simple argument, if a person punched you once, twice, 3, 4, 10, 20, 100 times, at some point, when someone raises their hand, you will automatically do that, to block it. It's on a physical basis. There are people who've grown up in abusive homes, whether it was physically abusive or emotionally or psychologically, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's abusive. And they will always put up defense mechanisms when they meet somebody who they open up their doors and let you in a little. They will put up their hand, and when love is coming their direction, they will do something that will be very defensive. And it's basically a knee-jerk reaction, because the place they were supposed to get love from when they were younger also ended up being the place that hurt them. So it's a natural reaction. It's no different than creatures who will suddenly, whether it's their needles or their other protective mechanisms. They say the porcupine has the softest underbelly of all creatures. And as a result, it has the sharpest needles to protect itself. A turtle will pull back under the shell. All of us have the same type of mechanisms, which on one hand are blessings. God gave us tools to protect ourselves from predators. When does it become a problem is when your protection is more important than you, and you're hiding all the time inside your shell, and you can never come out, or you come out in masquerade fashion. A true healthy relationship, essentially, because that's the first place where the damage, let's call it this way, any dignity of the malchus, of your song, if your song has been compromised, the first place it's going to play itself out is in your relationships with other people, especially emotional, romantic relationships. It's a given, because that's the place where you're most vulnerable. So wherever you put a person who's been in some way compromised in some way in their malchus level, on that dignity, on the song, the music within, it will be expressed in any vulnerable situation, because vulnerability is what recreates the scenario. When you're not vulnerable and you feel safe, obviously you don't have to use all your strongest armor and tools. So how many layers of armor do we have right now in our lives? Does anyone even know? And as a result, remember, armor works both ways. Maybe nobody can get in, but also nobody can get out. So it's like that means there's a part of you, your song, that will not emerge as a result of you protecting yourself. So of course the challenge and the question is, how can I have the best of both worlds? Well, it's not so simple, because if you lower the armor, there's also a risk that just like some part of you gets out, something can get in. Now, we all would love to master relationships where only one party is, the other one is vulnerable, and you're not. That would be very sweet. Many people. I wouldn't call that sweet. It's just some people. Like a guy told me a few months ago that he finally mastered the art of having relationships with no commitments. That was the thing. This was like his aspiring dream, and so I wanted to cry. So I said, humorously, I said to him, "So what? Did did medication help to reach that state, or what? Did you numb something inside of you?" Now, a relationship without commitment is quite somewhat called an oxymoron, But in a distorted mind, you could say, relationship means I'm getting everything I need, and I don't have to give as much as I take. That's. Obviously, the word relationship would not really be the appropriate word for it, because relationship means somewhat reciprocal and symbiotic, etc. But in our world of, as I said, of acquisition and control and vulnerability, this is what many people would like to have. Now, of course, the optimal thing is to be able to go back, retrace the steps to your own childhood, to the point before the snow was trampled upon, to that song within us. And that's what this week's chapter is about. So what's the story? The technical story is this. The Jews come out of Egypt. There's 210 years of suffering. So you'd think it's finally over. Well, it's never finally over. That's the thing. It's not. You think it's finally over. Instead, what God does was leads them to this place called the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea. Now, I don't know if you know this, but just look at a map, and the map then is very similar to the map today. There's no sea between Egypt and Israel. There's a Suez Canal, but there was no Suez Canal back then. There's no sea. So exactly what sea did they have to cross to be able to go from Egypt to the Promised Land? So the answer is that God actually took them south to the sea, and they didn't really have to even pass. So one has to wonder, what's the point of this whole story? Why not just take them straight through the Sinai Desert, straight to the Promised Land, and that's it? Take them out of the way, and suddenly now they're stuck with the sea, and the Egyptians decide to pursue them, so now there's no way out. All for what? To part the sea. There's an expression that says, "Lei ovid kuchabrich lei ovid nisi lamagana," is the expression. God does not do miracles in vain. This miracle was not necessary. It wasn't like there was no choice, they had to go through this water. And then this becomes a part of Jewish history, a major part, and we talk about Kriyas Yamsuf, parting of the sea, and then the song that they sang afterwards. And clearly there's something more significant here. And the answer is, when you read the mystical and the Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, what they say is that the parting of the sea is really a parting of the sea within our souls and our psyches all the time, going on all the time. The sea represents, using mystical language, the hidden world. Like a sea, it's a hidden world. It's all covered up. If we never went underwater and we had no cameras to go underwater, we would have no clue what kind of complex ecosystem exists beneath the sea cover. Today we know that the sea is more complicated than Earth. The Talmud says every creature that exists on land exists in the sea, which of course means not everything that exists in the sea exists on land. There are more creatures, more species in the sea than on land. 2/3 of the earth are covered in water. It's covered in water. And water still remains a mysterious domain. There are parts of the deepest parts of the ocean that still have not been explored. So it's a hidden world. Land, on the other hand, is called Alma Dizgalia. Alma Dizkasi is hidden. Alma Dizgalia, the revealed world. What is it on a psychological level? There's the conscious and unconscious life. Water is the state of the unconscious, so it's concealed. None of us have ever seen the unconscious, and we will never see it. That's why it's called unconscious. And conscious is the experiences that we are conscious of, we're aware of. But here's the big dilemma. Our conscious lives, our conscious behavior is a result of our unconscious forces. Very few of us remember anything before we were 2.5 years old, 3 years old. Even if you have some memories, it's a glimpse here, there, something maybe traumatic or something significant. We definitely don't have it as a memory, like a flowing memory of events day after day. On the other hand, you look at children 1 or 2 years old, that's when they're shaped. Their whole lives are shaped. I study my grandchildren who are in that age now, and it's amazing to me that their cutest age, they will never remember the age that this is so beautiful to see. So there's a cutoff point where things that happen become part of the unconscious, but they impact the rest of your life. We're not even talking about the 9 months in pregnancy and the earliest formative years where we have absolutely no recollection at all. So there's unconscious and there's a conscious. So as I said earlier, in a healthy environment, if you're in a healthy home and nurturing environment, the conscious life that you begin to develop as you grow from a child into an adult will support your unconscious malchus, and therefore you'll have that. You'll be fed with self-esteem and all the other courage and other forces that help you navigate life. If, God forbid, it doesn't exist, that type of nurturing, what will happen is fear will be one of the predominant forces in your life. Fear, insecurity, second guessing, doubts. Now, every human being has doubts, but I'm talking about being plagued by doubts. Your life is run by indecision. Like the guy that says, I used to be indecisive, and now I'm not so sure, So this becomes a state of being where you become very much always on the fence. Hard to make decisions, hard to make commitments, commitment issues. Yeah, it's good to mention that. So these are all symptoms of an unconscious disconnected from the conscious. So the unconscious in a healthy person is also unconscious, but it's like a healthy, think of it, a healthy breeding ground, a healthy soil that's allowing the flowers to emerge. If the flowers aren't emerging, or they're emerging in some distorted fashion, that means the soil is a problem beneath it. It's not just the flower, as I was describing. So we all have this music within us, and if the environment is right, the conditions are right, your childhood was cultivating and nurturing you, then what happens is your music will play in many different ways in life. And if it doesn't, it means there was some lack in that direction. Now, so the parting of the sea signifies a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. That once in history, this is the way the Hasidic masters put it, once in history, God demonstrated that there is a connection between the two. And they walked consciously through the unconscious. Think of it that way. So the unconscious sea became land that they can walk through. And it was meant to show the power that we can reconnect the two. And that was the reason that the event took place. And that's the reason we sing a song as a result. You don't just say thank you. Song comes from the deepest part of a person's soul. There's an expression, one of the Hasidic Rebbe says, that words are the quill of the mind, and song is the quill of the heart, or quill of the soul. Kulmas halev, or kulmas ha-nefesh. And you see this in many, many ways. For example, when one person is speaking, another person starts speaking, that's called interrupting them. When one person is singing, another person starts singing with them, that's called unison. Song is a language that doesn't require language. Someone sings a song, doesn't matter what language you speak, everyone can understand it. It's universal language. I actually tested this theory last year, right before Yom Kippur. So there was a group of Buddhist monks, of all things, that I was invited to speak for. Actually, they came from a country called Sri Lanka. Anybody visit Sri Lanka? Okay, neither have I. But I met this group of Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka in the Jewish Children's Museum, which is like a cultural exchange program they had there. It was last year, I remember it was before Yom Kippur. I remember because, so I shared a few words with them about the New Year, the Jewish New Year, some parallels of Jewish mysticism with Far Eastern mysticism, etc. And I don't know if you ever meet monks, but they're very, very, you have no idea what they're thinking. They sit very obediently, quietly, no reaction. You don't get laughter from your jokes. You don't, nothing. So you have no clue whether they're getting it or they're not getting it. So I decided, and later they told me they did get it, but that's how they're disciplined. No, really, they're disciplined to be like very neutral and very obedient. It's interesting. They're very different than the Western world. Western world, we're either arguing or, you sure know in someone's face that they don't agree with you, or if they don't just plain heckle you or something like that. There are no hecklers in the East. That could be the title of a book. No hecklers in the East. Okay. And also, in the Western world, you also know when people are falling asleep on you. They pretty much tell you that as well. Here, I have no clue, really. So I decided to try an experiment. After I finished my few words, I said, you know what? I'd like to sing a song. And I sang a melody, a Yom Kippur melody. First time, I think, in history that the Yom Kippur melody was sung for Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka. So I felt like somewhat of a pioneering agent, doing something like groundbreaking, At least that's what I felt at the time. So indulge me. And it was interesting, their reaction. Suddenly their faces came alive. And again, it's not because they didn't hear what I said. Later they told me they heard and they liked the words I shared. But words are words, and song is song. And the song, I saw, and it was a song. It's a song, a Hasidic melody, beautiful melody, and so on. It's a completely different language. It's one of the tricks of the trade that I use from time to time. Sometimes you're speaking, especially for audiences that somewhat, let's put it this way, not captive, even hostile. So a song is always great. And I've suggested it to some people, if all else fails, sing a song. So the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman once said that when you're asked a question and you don't have an answer, tell a story. And if that doesn't work, sing a song. And I can tell you, it's guaranteed. But you have to have a little guts, because, suddenly singing a song, But anyway, so I sang the song, and I realized that power of song. So song is a language that is far deeper. It's not just words with a melody. It comes from a different place. And this brings me back to the child in the mother's womb, in the ocean, in the sea. A child that's surrounded by the heartbeat is also surrounded, as I said, it sounds like the sea. because there's the embryonic fluids. So for 9 months we're immersed in the sea. That's really what's going on. And then there's the parting of the sea, and the child comes out into land, to earth. The same is true about the universe at large, on the macrocosm. The way the Bible describes the creation, the genesis of existence, is that in the beginning everything was mayim b'mayim, it says. Everything was covered in water. And then land emerged. Now this is not just incidental, it's critical. Because another thing about the sea is seamlessness. Fish in the sea, when you say I fit in like a fish in the sea, is a type of seamlessness between an object and a subject. Like can you say, for example, does water get wet? No. Water is wetness. We, people, mammals of the land, we experience things. There's me and my experience. But the truest experiences of life are like sea-like experiences, where you're so in the moment, you don't even feel the distinction between you and the experience. That's real moments. But we have a certain duality in our lives, which can lead to duplicity. A duality which is there's me and there's my experience. Fish in the sea are compared to that type of connection to the source. So children in their mother's womb have that type of connection. Obviously the purpose of life is not to stay there, is to come out on land and there experience the connection. So children in their mother's womb are that type of experience. And music and song is exactly the same experience. And just a very basic example. Look how many of us just you put on your headset, your headphones, or whatever you call it, iPods, and you drown everything out and you're completely submerged in music. They call it surrounded by music, surround sound, right? And it's like being in this. It's like being in the water, and everything is you shut off the whole world around you, and music engulfs you completely, and it does something for you, and you feel nurtured. Now, whether that can last once the music ends, or once you have to take the headset off, is another story. But the taste of it it resonates with us. Music is a resonating experience. And here's the most fascinating thing, is because we all have a song inside of us, long before we came to this earth. The soul, by virtue of its existence, is melody. That's the language of the soul. It's song. So song isn't just some type of another language. It happens to be more natural than speaking. If we were all really in touch with each other, we'd be singing to each other all the time. I know it sounds a little weird, but that sounds weird because this world doesn't sing, that's why. So song is some type of novelty. But the fact of the matter is, being submerged in a higher reality is, from a Torah point of view, is reality, and we've replaced it with a reality of being disconnected. So there's actually fascinating discourses, Hasidic discourses, that talk about the different songs that are taught to a child, to a fetus, to a child development in the womb. Songs that will help the child develop into an adult. Why is it, for example, that song doesn't have to be taught to us? Children, from the moment they're born, will respond to music. As a matter of fact, there are studies that show that when music is played, a fetus inside of the mother's womb will respond to it. Images where the legs, the arms will move, and when the song is played, and when the song stops, they stop moving. How does a child know this music? Everything we learn from those around us. Speech is also quite a miracle. But speech, you could say, okay, we don't understand how a child can suddenly at age 2, 3 suddenly begin speaking. That's another discussion. But you could at least say the child mimics what they hear. They hear the sounds of their parents. That's why if it's English, Russian, French, Hebrew, Spanish, whatever the language is. And then they copy it, and then they learn the words, and then they begin to speak. Even though that's not an adequate answer, really, because that should take 20 years for them to learn. They learn relatively quicker. So that means they have something inside of them before they begin to actually utter the words. But that's another discussion. But song and music, there's none of that. They recognize it before anybody trains them. They don't have to hear someone sing for a year or two before they realize or react to music. And the answer is very simple, is because the soul's natural language is musical. Speaking is not natural. Music is very natural. And I tested this theory too. This actually was not exactly deliberate. It was an accident, but I learned from it. I was once giving this lecture. It was actually a scientific a discussion seminar, and I was part of the panel. So I was waxing eloquent about something about physics and uncertainty principles and stuff like that. Anyway, I thought it was interesting, at least, and I think some people in the audience did. But then a few kids happened to walk into the auditorium. They were supposed to be, in a different room with a babysitter or whatever, and they started making a racket. So first I was, for 5 seconds I was somewhat a little offended. How come these children don't appreciate the brilliance that's going on in this room right now? And then after literally 5 seconds, I smiled and I realized, and I shared this with the whole crowd, there were a lot of academics there and thinkers and all kinds of things. I said, why is it that we're so all, preoccupied and mesmerized by these ideas? And here's a few little children, they're coming in. They're not interested in any of this. And here's the theory I developed, which was that lectures altogether are not natural realities. These are adult inventions. Lectures, since when does somebody get up and just speak to people? Children react to real things. If you sit down with them, play a game with them, you sing a song with them, you do something, they'll react. And children are a very good barometer to know whether you're for real or you're full of it, basically. So that's what I developed, and after that I always think to myself, whenever I get up to speak, I say, I wish a few children here would do a little reality check, remind us all of what really matters, and so on. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that nothing valuable cannot be said, but the setting is not as natural, let's put it this way, as what children relate to. Children relate to love. They relate to nurturing. They relate to being inside a song. That's what they relate to. And if you play a song, children will listen. If you speak to them, they may or they may not. Let's put it this way. So the fact is, the soul, melody and song is the natural domain of the soul. So what was the natural reaction when the sea parted, when the unconscious was emerged, was a song, because a song is a voice from the unconscious. A song is a reminder. That's why it resonates. That's why when you hear a song, like nothing else, it can transport you to another time and place. It can take you from a moment of grief to a moment of high joy. It can touch you in many profound ways, and in many, many deep ways. Now, there's a thing today, music therapy, and so on. Obviously, it may not be sufficient because you have a life to live and you can't just constantly be submerged in music. But if you really appreciate its power as your voice, it could be a tremendous force in helping us deal with many, many of our issues. No question. So to bring it back to our discussion here is this. Each of us has this melody, and it's waiting to be released. How much of it you have access to depends on the person. How close is it to the surface also depends. Many, many factors. I discussed some of the most important factor of all is no question is our childhood. What happens in our childhood? But no matter what kind of childhood you had, that does not mean you cannot have access to that music. So to develop a formula requires a few components here. First of all, the absolute confidence that you have that song inside of you. And that the unconscious, even though you may never see it, is actively beating within your chest, within your soul, all the time. I've often described how does one see an unconscious? You can't see an unconscious, but you can see its effects. I mentioned one before. When you speak to someone, and you see they resist going to certain places, you know that that's a raw area, that's a tender area that their unconscious doesn't want to go to, because something's going on there. So you don't see it directly, you see what's called extrapolation. You can extrapolate. It's like, think of an imaginary dark wall. It's shrouded in darkness and shadows, and you can't touch it. You can't shine any light on it. Is there any way to find out what this, and you can't go over and touch it, is there any way to find out what that wall looks like? And the answer is yes. You throw a ball. You bounce a ball off the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. If it bounces straight back, you know it's a straight part of the wall. If it bounces back to the right, you know it's jagged. You bounce, and you bounce it to the left. If you keep bouncing, what you get is an image of the wall. This is called in in Jewish philosophical terminology, yediyas hashlila, which means extrapolation. It's negative thinking. It's like the process of elimination. You don't see the wall ever, but by bouncing enough times, you can get almost an image of what the wall is like. And this is the same thing is true when a trained person is speaking to you, and they know how to communicate. They may not even see your unconscious, but there's ways to ask questions, how you respond, the areas you want to address, the things you don't want to address, how you talk about certain things, how much self-awareness you have. All that gives a person a pretty good picture, a snapshot of what the unconscious is like. The fears we have, the insecurities I mentioned, the strengths we have. So having a good sense of knowing, first of all, where you stand in this regard. I know that over the years, sometimes I've talked about this theme about music and song within. I mean, not maybe as elaborate as I did tonight. And I've had various reactions. I've had a reaction. Someone says, "I don't know what you're talking about," and begin to understand the concept of a music within. And I was, first time I heard that, I was surprised a bit, because even if you may not know your song, but it resonates, the idea that everybody has a unique voice. I asked this person, I said, do you think you have anything unique to contribute? He says, I don't know, I don't think so. Which was saddened me. And the reason obviously is, it's become very obvious that no one ever gave him that confidence. No one even told him that that's the case. So each of us has to assess somewhat of our own confidence in ourselves in that way. And sometimes that's where you need faith, frankly. Sometimes it may not be rational. Rationally you may think very, very badly of yourself. You may have a whole case of why you're worthless, or why you don't have anything unique, etc., etc. I was once at a Friday night table. There were two brothers there. They looked very much alike. And one of them was very articulate, and he spoke. So I asked his brother, so what do you think? He says, I agree with my brother. So then I said, I said to him, is there anything you don't agree with? He says, no, we agree about everything, So I said, so why do we need two of you, So he didn't really appreciate that. He said, I don't understand what you're saying, there's just two of us, But my point was, God put two people, they probably have some differences. And it's very nice that he agrees with his brother about everything. That's like, a little strange. But the point is, each of us have, like the guy that says, what do you do for a living? He says, I work for my brother. And what does your brother do? He's looking for a job, This is for our present day economy a good joke. So sometimes when someone tells you they're working for their brother, ask the next question. Don't just stop there. But anyway, so the confidence of knowing that you have that inside of you is a critical one. And if you don't have that confidence, faith has its role. Sometimes it's faith in the fact that you were put here on this earth. It's not just about belief in God, in some type of supernatural God and being a crutch, etc., etc. Faith is faith in yourself, that God gave you an indispensable soul. And even if you don't feel it, it's still true. That's a pretty powerful type of faith to have. And I would submit that anyone that has ever done anything really groundbreaking and earth-shattering has some type of faith. There's a doctor that comes to this class once in a while. He's not here tonight, but he's been here. And he calls himself a self-proclaimed atheist. But he likes my class. I can't really explain why, but I have a lot of atheists that like this class for some reason. I think my God, they tell me, your God I can handle. So I always, and he happens to be, as a doctor, he's a research, mainly research. And he's taken upon himself 3 or 4 diseases, not the common ones, more obscure ones, to conquer. That's what he is convinced he's going to do with his life. That's what wants to make his contribution. And I always ask him, I say to him, how are you so sure you're going to conquer these diseases? Maybe some diseases are just not conquerable. Absolutely is not even a question. So I told him, you're a fanatic fundamentalist. That's what you are. I always tell him. How does he have this confidence? It's like faith, based on rational. Maybe something, logically you could say some illnesses are not conquerable. But he's absolutely convinced. And no different than the Wright brothers or some other, some people call them crackpots at the time, who come up with an idea, they're going to fly, because they see birds flying. So if someone came to you 150 years ago and says, why don't you invest a few dollars in my new innovation, I'm going to fly. You throw them out of your house, or wherever, your office. Unless you're as crazy as they are. But they set their mind to it. And today, every time I take off on a plane, I'm always like, some ways. It's not just an airplane. It's a whole industry. It's a whole city. There's a whole economy around every airport. Not forget about the security lines and all the other disruptions. But the point is that people set their minds to something, as crazy as it was, and they just did it. I don't know. That's not faith. What did they ride on? They had some type of prophecy. Well, that's just as religious as faith, I guess. However, good. It's not the conventional word faith in God, and so on. But it's a faith. It's an absolute conviction that something is possible, even impossible. And all major inventions in history all are a result of such a conviction. And in most cases, pretty crazy. Because that's precisely why it's an innovation, because no one else is thinking about it, and no one else thinks it's possible. The problem is not everything that's crazy becomes an innovation. Just remember that. So it's a combination. You need to have, but it's what they call really thinking out of the box. As Einstein said, you cannot change a system from within the system. You have to be able to think out of the system, and that's not easy to do because we're all part of the system, and we all think a certain way. We were trained to think a certain way. So how do we suddenly think differently? But that's what it takes. So faith itself is a very powerful tool to know that you have a song inside of you. That's step one. Step number two is obviously you have to give time to cultivate this song. It's not going to happen if you're going to allow your life to be 90 miles an hour and you're going to expect it to somewhere emerge. Like when exactly? When you come home exhausted at the end of the day, you've not given any time for your inner self or soul. Obviously, there's simply, no matter how powerful that song is inside of you, there's no room, there's no platform for it. There's no time for it. So it requires time. I always make two suggestions that I think work very well to help you get your song going. Number one, in the morning when you wake up. And number two, before you go to sleep. Two exercises. They're pretty simple. And their power lies not in the drama of these exercises, but rather in their continuity, persistence. Like the classic story with Rabbi Akiva, the drops of water, one after another, persistently can pierce anything. And the two exercises are pretty simple. One of them is in the morning, there's a traditional prayer said, Moda Ani. I acknowledge to you for returning my soul to me. It's basically the gist of it. With compassion, is the full text, which you can find in any prayer book. But the point is not so much the Hebrew, but the message. And that is that as soon as you wake up, which is a moment that is very fresh, and usually no one has occupied it yet, because very few people that I know have business meetings the second they wake up, even though I'm sure some are getting close to doing that. Today with an iPhone, you could probably pull that off. So the first few moments, minute or two, just to focus on the fact that you have a soul. And what shapes your life is not your body and not the things you're going to be involved and immersed in during this day. The soul is the hub of your life. So however you want to turn this into a meditation or a thought, and you can replace the word soul with whatever word you like, your song if you want, your voice. You have a voice that is somewhere concealed inside this body of yours. And this body is going to be busy all day with whatever it's going to be busy with. And in the morning you're acknowledging that you have this voice inside of you, this song. Even if it doesn't yet know how to sing, just the fact that you are aware of it and acknowledge it, you cannot imagine how much power that lies in that. Think of it like children. Children, above all, what they need more than anything, not gifts, not distractions, trips. That's all nice and good to keep them busy. A child needs above anything acknowledgement, awareness that the child is there. And that's the thing that hurts children most, that they're not valued. No one has time for me. So it may sound like very simple, but if it's persistent, especially at a child's young age, they don't have anything else. The only thing they have is the love that's given to them. And when that's deprived, even if it's not intentional, it is devastating. And the soul is exactly the same way. It simply needs to know that you're aware of me. And when you begin to give it awareness, it gives you back in return a lot more than you'll ever give it. So that's exercise number 1 in the morning. And the second one is before going to sleep, instead of falling asleep with a television on, or with a newspaper in your nose, or whatever, is to go to sleep with something like a poem, something spiritual, anything that speaks to your heart and soul, anything that's not part of your daily routine. That's the bottom line. Not to go to sleep with all the anxieties and concerns that you were preoccupied with throughout the day. Something fresh. And there you go, right? If you go to sleep like that, and you wake up this way, so at least that period of time between going to sleep to waking up, those hours will be a lot cleaner and purer than you may imagine. Because if you don't do that, you don't create these boundaries, then what happens is you carry into your sleep everything that happened throughout the day. That usually happens anyway, but at least this little break can help you create something fresh. And then you can begin to experience something new the next day. Sleep is one of these mysterious domains we know very little about. But the way the Medrash and the mystics put it is that the soul returns to some type of fountain. It goes back to the source of the symphony. So it goes back to reconnect to the music that it has, and it gets refreshed. Now there's also another part of refreshing, is that our cells in our body get refreshed, which is that's the primary part that we experience. But the soul also gets refreshed. But again, it has no outlet. So the refreshing of the soul remains something that just remains somewhat amorphous. So by acknowledging, by preparing to go to sleep in a more, let's call it, spiritual state of mind, it allows the sleep to be a more purifying one, a more rejuvenating one, and gives you more strength the next day on the spiritual side of things. Those are 2 exercises. Now, as far as during the waking hours, look, a true, they said the Baal Shem Tov, of the things that he taught, one of the things was joy, was celebration, simcha, was dancing. Now, most people don't dance 24/7. But someone that's in touch with the spirituality of life and the energy of life is actually dancing all the time. Now, obviously, if they did it physically, they would be reported. But spiritually and psychologically, they do dance. Because they see, let's call it this way, to put it in more poetic terms, they see the dancing particles of existence. And they see human beings, anyone they meet, and the events in their lives, as being spiritual sparks that are waiting to be ignited. So imagine a person, business people, when they go places, especially if they own businesses, everything they see, every person they see, is an opportunity for their business. Everything. Imagine someone sees it the same way, but not for business, but for spiritual purposes. Sees everything as divine providence. Everything is a potential spark to be ignited. So when you meet somebody, there's a reason you met. That you should warm and illuminate that person, and that person should warm and illuminate you. And imagine a person navigates and travels the world with that type of attitude. A person like that is dancing all the time. A person like that has inner joy all the time. Because they're not first of all, they're not victim of circumstances. They're always looking for opportunities. They're always on the offensive, not on the defensive. And secondly, they're always looking how to play their music. And they see the world as their stage. Not in a selfish way. Because just as each of us has a unique, indispensable musical note, so does everyone else. So my music can't be complete without you. So for me to play well, you have to play well. And that person is always looking for partners in that sense to play the music together, to play this symphony. So it's like a dual experience. On one hand, every one of us is necessary. On the other hand, all of us need everyone else for it to be a complete melody. And that's when you have an attitude like that, everything changes. Now, we're not trained to think like this. We're trained to think, what can I do to take care of my needs today? That's how we think. Maybe no one of us, we're going to phrase it quite that way. We'll phrase it more, what can I do to to get my needs met so I can make my contribution to the world or something like that. But the question is, what's more important, the contribution or your needs? So this, again, everyone has to answer for themselves. But the way this message comes across is that each of us has a song to play. It's something that's a gift that we have, but it's a gift that we have to give, because you have to actually play it. And usually people that are playing this music will help bring it out of you, and you'll bring it out of them. But when we gravitate and we congregate with people who are busy with, let's put it this way, not the music, but the other parts of our lives, obviously that helps drown out that song and music. Like I've often mentioned, you look around at your list of friends, how many people that you know, that you give them a call or you meet with them, and you feel musical, you feel uplifted, you feel hope. And how many of your so-called contacts that when you talk to them, they help to remind you how resigned you should be, and how miserable life is, and how hopeless things are. And there are people that are, rest assured, you get too enthusiastic, they'll be rude. There'll be a very, very welcoming, a rude awakening they'll be happy to rudely awaken you to the fact that life is not as hopeful as you think it is. And I remember a few weeks ago, actually I was speaking about a similar theme, and someone who left this class called me the next day and said, I left your class, I was like, flying, really felt confident. And next morning, there was that person that comes to my life and shot it all out of the air and made me, the whole thing was like one Cinderella dream. So I said, so who's going to win this battle, So sometimes it takes effort, because it's not very easy let's put it this way. It takes one fool to burn down a building that 1,000 wise people could build. So you can have a lot of exuberance and inspiration and confidence, but it's not difficult for somebody to get to our weak spots and so-called weaken our resolve. So this requires surrounding yourself with people that believe in you. People believe in you, it helps you believe in yourself, and vice versa. And looking for ways in our lives to sing this song, to play this song. The ultimate goal, of course, is to be able to find your soulmate, your partner in life, to be able to play the song together. So it's not an accident that the Talmud says that finding a shidduch, finding a soulmate, is as difficult as parting the sea. It's interesting, it uses the parting the sea as an example. Because like bridging the unconscious and the conscious is that's the equivalent of a good match. Two strangers who grew up in different homes and different attitudes should be able to come together and join as one, not with one annihilating the other, but actually two equals, like two circles that become one greater circle. Two musical notes that become one larger composition is like the parting of the sea. But just like the parting of the sea was not impossible, so too this is not impossible. And when you are able to find that type of partner to play music with, obviously that's the greatest blessing of all. Because that becomes a foundation to build a home, to build a family, to build an environment which will cultivate and nurture more musical notes. And that's the blessing I want to wish all of you here, that you should all build homes like that your home should be a living, walking symphony. So whoever walks into it feels the music, even if music isn't physically playing. You can see it in the sparkle in people's eyes, in the lightness of their step, in the way they communicate and speak. In general, the attitude of feeling uplifted. There are rooms you walk into, you feel one way, and there are rooms you walk into that lift your spirits. So instead of waiting for someone to do it for you, maybe we should all become initiators to begin playing this music. So what I want to say to all of you is that if I close my eyes, all I see are musical notes sitting in this room. Even with my eyes open, I think you could see it somewhat as well. Hopefully each of you can see it in yourselves and at least believe in it enough to begin to work on it. And as always, we're either part of the problem or part of the solution. So you play your music and song, you are contributing. And if, God forbid, you're not, then you're on the other side of the fence meanwhile. I'm not saying that to be critical or in any way, but the fact is it's pretty, only two options here really. And third option, the undecided, is also more or less like option 2. So, in this Shabbat Shira weekend, I want to wish everyone here the ability, this courage, the strength to access your inner song. And please see me as a co-conspirator in this process. And maybe we could all help each other play more beautiful music than ever. What can I say? I mean, there's so much pain in this world, and so many challenges that preoccupy our lives. It's always the great mystery is how to cross over. But ultimately, it comes down to individuals making a choice. I don't know. I don't have any global solution that can say everybody suddenly will drink some Kool-Aid and you'll solve the problems. But individually, I know people can make a choice. Individually, it's one by one. And everyone here is an individual, and you have that unique voice and unique song. And, you have to answer primarily to yourself, above all. And the most beautiful thing is to see someone beginning to realize and actually acting on, fulfilling, actualizing their great potential. And surrounding ourselves with people, as I said, that believe in it. So it's an honor for me to sit here in this musical symphony called life. And by virtue of the fact that you're all here on this earth and that God gave us each life, Maidani, we acknowledge the soul's return every morning anew, that we should all have very healthy and meaningful and fulfilling musical lives, in ways that you can dance and sing forever and ever. Not? Okay, so let me announce that Philip is not giving the class tomorrow night. Following week? Yeah. I will be giving next Wednesday night, regular class. And I will say as well, if you have not left your email address here with us, please do so. So we can stay in touch. I shall send out a weekly email, and it's always good to be in touch. You never know when we need to do a jam session. So with that being said, thank you very much for your attention. You're a very kind audience. Thank you.